What's going on, guys, and welcome back to Top 10 Nerd. Spider-Man has been through quite the ringer, and while we already did a top 10 list of the worst things he's been through, there's easily 10 more. I mean, the dude's life is pretty insane. So here to break down 10 more unpleasant moments, I'm Taylor McWatters, and here are the top 10 worst things to happen to Spider-Man Part 2. Kicking off the list at number 10, Buried by Kraven. In the storyline, Kraven's Last Hunt, published in 1987, it has quite an interesting illustration on its front page. We see a dark Spider-Man crawling out of a grave with the tombstone reading, "Here lies Spider-Man." Weird, what's going on? This 5-part series, of course, as you would guess, centers around the death of Spider-Man. So Kraven is frustrated after his failed attempts to catch Spider-Man, so he comes up with his plan and seemingly shoots him dead. So Kraven buries him, and even worse, he takes Spider-Man's suit and takes his place. So now, Kraven's roaming New York and brutally attacking criminals, including a group that was assaulting Mary Jane. So then 2 weeks later, Peter wakes up from the effects of the tranquilizer and digs himself out to freedom. Then when Spider-Man confronted Kraven, Kraven was like, "No way, buddy, I'm the real deal. I'm doing this hero gig now, not you. Get out of town. Beat it, mister." And Kraven releases Vermin, which is just a great character. So he attacks Peter thinking he was the same Spider-Man that had given him a beatdown before. So then Peter has to now convince Vermin otherwise. Vermin is actually about to kill Peter until Kraven intervenes. Talk about a bad couple of weeks. Yeesh. And before we continue this list, guys, if you haven't already, make sure you toss this video a thumbs up because it really helps us out here at the studio. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now back to Spider-Man's horrible life. Number 9. Clones. The Clone Saga wasn't loved by fans. I mean, for starters, it actually lasted way too long. The Clone Saga began in 1994 and lasted until 1996, and it carried out through every single Spider-Man comic. So that entire time you were reading the issues, you were also forced to keep up with this dreadful clone plot that just wouldn't stop. And on top of that, there were these new characters and plots that were coming in every issue that it became almost a chore to retain interest. The story was set to end in Amazing Spider-Man 400 in 1995, but those early issues of the Clone Saga did so well with sales, so they decided to drag it on. One of the worst parts about all this was that fans had to find out that Ben Reilly was intended on being the real Spider-Man after all of this, and the Peter Parker we've been following for years was actually the clone. So naturally fans weren't having it, and they ended up retconning this again so that Peter was Spider-Man and Ben was still the clone. I mean, what a headache to explain, let alone be forced to read for years. And the worst part of the bunch being maximum clonage. This issue, that's when it goes the worst. So check it out, or don't. Number 8, best friend problems. It's always incredible to me when a superhero has a bully. Like, it always happens. And I mean, sure, it's a nice message to audience members not to be a bully. You know, you never know what battle somebody else is fighting at home. And it's usually a nice reveal. Like, Flash Thompson is more of a lighthearted bully in the new Spider-Man movies. He kind of looks up to Spider-Man, but he doesn't look to Peter Parker. It's a fun dynamic to play with. So when we meet Harry Osborn and see his arc, it's pretty wild. Harry initially wasn't a fan of Peter Parker in the first place. He thought he was a snob. But then he realized Peter's distance was actually due to his aunt's health problems, and the two of them ended up becoming good friends. In the 2002 Spider-Man film, we see the beginning of a best friend becoming the villain, and this time propelled by jealousy. And it was a nice relationship to see on screen. It added a lot to the film. We have James Franco playing Harry Osborn in the original trilogy, and by the time the third one rolls around, Harry is a full-on villain, sporting the new alter ego, the Green Goblin, taking the place, of course, of his father, Norman. Harry and his father's relationship was never easy breezy, even before Norman became a supervillain. So Peter was helping Harry get through problems with his father, and Spider-Man was fighting the Green Goblin. So we were treated to these layers of who knows what, and all these dynamic relationships playing in with each other. And it's what made the first Spider-Man movie so good. In the comics, when Peter and Norman finally figured out who each other really was, Norman suffered from amnesia after the fight. So Peter made up this story about how Norman was actually injured while he was helping Spider-Man fight the Green Goblin. Not a bad save. So Peter went to the hospital to check up on him, you know, see how things were going. And then Harry saw this as a sign that the two of them were friends. So sometimes your bestie gets close to you, sometimes they try and kill you with their dad's glider. You got what you got. And coming up at number 7, hit by a train. In Spider-Man Far From Home, we see Peter go toe-to-toe with Mysterio, a villain fans have been begging to see on the big screen for years. And Mysterio does a pretty good job convincing Peter that what he's seeing is real. But what Peter doesn't expect is a real-life train to hit him going really fast. There have actually been conversations online about how this hit should have killed Peter. He got hit by an Ice 3 bullet train, and one Reddit account went so far as to actually do the math on on how Peter should have died with the speed and the momentum of the train. Also, that's a lot of effort. Just lie to us. Say he would have been fine. Don't tell us he would have died. Not only does this hit injure Peter, but once he slowly climbs onto the train and collapses, he's taken like almost 2,000 kilometers away to the Netherlands, where Happy has to pick him up in a field of tulips. This was a great part in the movie. I mean, seeing him lose everything and barely obtain the strength to go back and fight Mysterio again, you love to see it, but you also hate to see it, you know? And number 6, extra arms. The Spider or the Man. In Amazing Spider-Man issue 100 back in 1963, the issue begins with Peter Parker wanting to dismiss his abilities. I mean, I'll take them. If you don't want them, just toss them this way. Thanks. So he comes up with a solution and takes a swig. For Gwen, he adds, before downing this mix. And as we could have guessed, it doesn't go well, because it's on this list. So by the last page of the issue, we see Peter as he ends up growing 4 extra arms. Not like this, he says. No, it's happening, buddy. So the next issue focuses on Peter as he tries to get a solution for this new, not so handy problem through Michael Morbius's blood. So with the new Morbius movie with Jared Leto coming out, could we possibly see Tom Holland sport the new 6-arm look? Part of me hopes not, but I mean, anything Tom Holland does is gold, so I'm here for it. And number 5. More girl problems. Peter in his human life alone could be a sitcom. In one trilogy, we have Mary Jane as the love life, and then in Garfield's movies, we have Gwen Stacy. How many girls does Spider-Man have in these comics? Well, that's a tricky question because Spider-Man and Peter Parker are very different people. They're perceived differently by others, specifically Black Cat. So Black Cat, being a known burglar, is met by Spider-Man in the night, and she knows he's at minimum attracted to her, right? Physically. In Amazing Spider-Man issue 194, we see the two of them get pretty flirty and even exchange a kiss. But when Black Cat finds out who Spider-Man really is, she's less interested. You gotta play it cool, Pete. Play it cool. Keep the mask on. Less talking, more masking. And number 4, the deal with the devil. The One More Day storyline is next up on our list. This is a 4-issue story, but because of delays, it took 5 months to conclude. That's a lot of waiting. I mean, we're still waiting for the Black Widow movie to come out, so I mean, it's not too bad in comparison. But still, any wait sucks. The story began in 2007 in Amazing Spider-Man issue 544. And instead of the usual thugs or enhanced scientist villain, we see Spider-Man make a deal with the devil. The devil, of course, being Mephisto. So after Spider-Man revealed his identity in the Civil War storyline, people of course were after him, now knowing his true identity. So after a bullet strikes Aunt May instead of Peter, he of course feels like he's the one to blame. Even the opening of the story shows Aunt May in a hospital bed with Peter talking about how she was perfectly fine just a few days before. Like, it's dark right off the bat. So he first goes to Iron Man and gives him being the one who convinced Peter to reveal his identity in the first place. So he webs him up and gets all cool and bad cop. And it's nice to see, but it's also heartbreaking because that bullet was meant for him. Peter is feeling the guilt, and cue Mephisto. Yeah, the devil shows up and offers a deal to Peter while Aunt May is currently dying. So MJ adds to the pitch. So basically what happens is that the world will now forget about Peter's identity. Great. Aunt May will live. Neat. But the kicker is that MJ and Peter never got married. It's kind of like Shrek 4, except worse. So they hug one final time, and MJ explains that their love was always meant to be, and that whatever Mephisto does is unstoppable. And then poof, the deal is sealed. The next day, Peter's like, oh man, another uneventful night, just the way I like it, me being Peter Parker, not married, and all that jazz. And all the backstory just like that was wiped out at the turn of a page. Number 3, the death of Spider-Man. When a supervillain escapes, it's not a good time. Usually they're coming back for that person that put them there in the first place. Ultimate Spider-Man's death is absolutely beautiful and super saddening. It's done really well. So after tackling Captain America and literally taking a bullet for him, Peter is left to fight the Green Goblin and a few other bad apples that are out for revenge. And this entire climax happens in Peter's neighborhood, so everybody's watching. Everyone's running around trying to figure out what's going on, trying to get to safety, and he's limping around, tossing out quips, pulling off fire hydrants, and using Electro's current to like hurt everybody else. It's amazing. This is a plot that I think we'll actually see in the next Spider-Man movie in a way. So with all these villains now knowing Peter's true identity, we could get them all showing up to his house, just bringing the battle to him. Let's just hope it doesn't end the same way, with Peter's heroic demise, that is. Number 2. Curtis Connors. It's always fun giving one of your favorite teachers a hand in a project or something, but I mean, giving them a hand literally could end up pretty bad. In the comics, Dr. Kurt Connors lost his arm due to an explosion in a war and started to spend his life researching on new ways to grow it back. Hence the lizard growing the tail back thing. You got it. So once this finally happened, there were a few side effects. We see his arm grow back, but then as we see in the Amazing Spider-Man movie, Dr. Curtis Connors also becomes a full-on lizard. I mean, sure, lizards can grow their tails, but when you add that in with a human driven by rage and mixed DNA, the brain can alter as well. And his story arc begins with Amazing Spider-Man 6, and it's really cool. Especially if you've seen the movie, if you haven't quite read the comics, this is a nice little backstory that they didn't explain too much. And finally, at number 1, he gave MJ cancer. You heard me. In Spider-Man Dark Reign, we learn a lot what Spider-Man's powers can do. The ability to climb walls, amazing. Shoot webs, ha, how fun. But when it comes to reproducing, his DNA might just be too problematic. The story takes place 30 years in the future in an alternate universe, Earth 70237. Peter ends up visiting the grave of MJ and discovers the real reason that she died. The radioactive cells in his sperm ended up giving MJ cancer. Yeah. That's what? Peter had the choice of staying with her when she was dying or attend gunshots outside as Spider-Man. He left her, and when he came back, she had already passed away. Super sad. This made Peter vow to never become Spider-Man again. It's a pretty dark story, and the whole giving MJ cancer thing, I mean, I hope we never have to relive that on the big screen ever. Not even anytime soon, just never in general. That would be great. Well, there you have it, guys. Which of these dark Spider-Man moments is your least favorite? Do you think we'll see Spider-Man take on all of his villains in the next movie? Do you think he's gonna die in the next movie? I mean, I really hope not. Probably not. Let us know in the comments down below. We love reading predictions. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Taylor McWatters, and we'll catch you on the next one. See ya, nerds.